I still remember the day I met Emily like it was yesterday. It was the summer of 2010 in Chicago, that sweet spot between late June and early July when the city hums with energy. The air was thick with the smell of street food, Lake Michigan shimmered under a cloudless sky, and Grant Park was alive with laughter and music from the Taste of Chicago festival. I'd gone with a few college friends, just looking to unwind before my final semester started at Northwestern. I had no idea that a chance meeting that day would change the entire course of my life. Emily wasn't like anyone I'd met before. She was confident, sharp-tongued in a charming way, and carried herself like someone who already knew she could light up any room she walked into. She had that kind of laugh that made people turn around, not because it was loud, but because it was genuine. We talked that day about everything: favorite music, her obsession with 90s rom-coms, how she hated ketchup on hot dogs, a cardinal sin in Chicago, she joked. I remember walking away that evening thinking, damn, I could fall for this girl. And I did. Hard. Our relationship grew fast. By the time I graduated in 2011, we were inseparable. We'd spend weekends exploring new restaurants in Wicker Park or just stay and binge-watching The Office reruns on Netflix. She'd fall asleep halfway through an episode, her head on my chest, and I'd lie there thinking that if this was what life was going to be like, quiet, simple, and warm, I could live like this forever. We got married in 2014. It wasn't some grand wedding. We didn't have the money for that. Just a small ceremony at her aunt's garden in Evanston, surrounded by close friends and family. My mom cried when she saw me waiting at the altar. Emily looked stunning in her simple white dress. No veil, just a smile that could disarm anyone. For a long time, I thought that day marked the start of my forever. The first few years were good. No, they were great. We built a little life together in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Logan Square. I worked as a systems analyst for a local logistics company, and Emily was a marketing associate at a mid-sized firm downtown. We weren't rich, but we made it work. We took a trip to Seattle one summer, spent Christmases with her family in Michigan, and even adopted a golden retriever named Cooper who instantly became the center of our world. Looking back, though, I realize how easy it is to confuse routine with happiness. We had the stability, the bills were paid, the fridge was stocked, birthdays were remembered, but something began to fade between us, slowly and quietly. Like the way paint chips off an old wall. You don't notice it happening until one day you see it's half gone. I started noticing the small things first. How she'd spend longer getting ready before work, even though we'd just be having dinner together afterward. Or how she'd laugh a little too hard at texts that weren't from me. Sometimes she'd sit in bed scrolling through her phone, smiling faintly, and when I asked what was funny, she'd just say, "Oh, just something my coworker said." I never pushed it. Maybe I should have, but I trusted her. I wanted to trust her. There were nights she'd come home late, saying she had to stay back for a campaign launch. I believed her, because that was Emily, driven, ambitious, career-focused. I was proud of her, even when her job started to consume her more and more. I figured it was just part of growing up. We were both busy adults trying to make something of ourselves. But the emotional distance between us was growing, even if I refused to admit it. We went from talking about our day to exchanging basic pleasantries. From cuddling before bed to sleeping back to back, pretending to be asleep. The worst part wasn't the silence, it was how normal it began to feel. Around 2019, things really started to shift. That was when she started mentioning a new name at work, Nathan. Nathan said this funny thing today, or Nathan's got this great idea for our campaign. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd always been friendly with her co-workers. But over time, his name started creeping into more conversations than I was comfortable with. Then came the subtle changes. She started dressing differently. New clothes, new perfume, even started working out more. I told myself it was just self-care, maybe a new phase. I didn't want to sound paranoid, and honestly, I was too proud to admit to anyone that I was starting to feel insecure. I remember one night, she came home late again, the clock striking midnight, and I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch ESPN but really just waiting for her to walk through the door. She smelled like whiskey and someone else's cologne. My heart sank, but I said nothing. That's the thing about love. It makes you blind in ways you don't even realize. You build this image of someone in your mind, and you'll twist every piece of evidence to protect that illusion. I kept telling myself, She's tired. She's stressed. It's just work. Anything to avoid the truth I was too afraid to face. We went on like that for months. The spark was gone, but I convinced myself every couple goes through rough patches. We'd fix it. We always did. Then COVID hit in early 2020, and everything changed. We were both working from home, stuck in the same space day and night. At first, I thought the lockdown would bring us closer. But it did the opposite. She'd spend hours locked in the guest room on Zoom calls, sometimes whispering, sometimes laughing softly. When I'd walk by, the sound would stop. One evening, in April, I caught her smiling at her phone, that same faint smile I'd seen months earlier. And that's when I noticed the reflection of her screen in the window, a message from Nathan. My stomach twisted into a knot. I didn't say anything then, but the doubt began to rot away at me from the inside. I tried to keep things normal. Made her coffee in the mornings, asked about her day, planned small date nights when restaurants finally reopened. But she always seemed somewhere else, distracted, distant, like she was living a parallel life that didn't include me. I could feel her slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. Then one night, she told me she wanted space. Those were her words, space. I remember sitting there on the couch, Cooper asleep by my feet, and hearing her say it so calmly, like she was asking to borrow a sweater. I didn't even know what to say. My mind was spinning. Space from what? From me. From us. She said she needed to figure herself out, that she'd been feeling trapped, like she was losing her sense of independence. She swore it wasn't about anyone else, that she just needed time. I wanted to believe her so badly, but deep down, I already knew. You always know. The following weeks were a blur. She stayed with a friend, at least that's what she told me, while I tried to keep it together. The house felt empty without her laughter, without the clinking of her coffee mug every morning. I'd walk past her side of the closet and feel this hollow ache in my chest. I started drinking more, working less. Even Cooper seemed confused. He'd sit by the door every evening, waiting for her to come home. Then, a month later, I saw it. A photo on Instagram. Emily, at a rooftop bar, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. And sitting next to her, arm around her waist, was Nathan. That moment broke something in me. It wasn't just jealousy, it was betrayal in its purest form. I felt like my entire marriage had been a lie. Like I'd been living in someone else's story, and suddenly, the page had been ripped away. But even then, even after seeing that picture, I didn't lash out. I didn't text her. I didn't call her. I just sat in the dark that night, scrolling through her old photos, wondering where I'd gone wrong. And that was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. It was also the start of something else. Something I never saw coming. The weeks that followed that photo felt like living inside a fog, everything blurry, heavy, and quiet. I'd wake up every morning and instinctively reach for the other side of the bed, only to find it cold and empty. Cooper had started sleeping by the door now, as if he still believed she'd walk back through it someday. I think a part of me still believed that too. I stopped checking her social media after a while, though not by choice. I had to. Every photo was like a small stab to the chest. Her and Nathan at a farmer's market. Her laughing at some lakeside cafe. Her wearing the same scarf I'd bought her for our 3rd anniversary. It was like watching my life being rewritten in real time, but I wasn't in it anymore. I'd never been the kind of man who fell apart easily. I was the one who always kept things steady, the planner, the fixer. But when the person you've built your world around suddenly vanishes, every plan falls apart. I started working from home full-time again, partly because I couldn't stand seeing happy couples on the train, and partly because the idea of small talk with anyone made me sick. My boss was understanding for a while, but even he started hinting that I take some time off. The truth was, I didn't need time off. I needed answers. It was around mid-September 2020 when she finally called me. Her name flashed across my phone, and my heart did this stupid thing where it jumped, like a dog hearing its owner's car pull into the driveway. For a split second, I thought maybe she was ready to come home. But when I picked up, her voice was calm. Too calm. She asked how I was doing, if I'd been eating, if Cooper was okay. The way she said it, polite, detached, felt like I was talking to a stranger. And then, after a long pause, she said it. I've been seeing someone. I remember that exact moment like it was burned into my memory. The words hung there, heavy and cold, as if the room itself had stopped breathing. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just went silent. My throat tightened, and all I could think was, so it's true. She said it wasn't planned, that it just happened. That she didn't want to hurt me, but she'd found something with Nathan that she hadn't felt in a long time. She said it like she was describing some beautiful, tragic accident. When she said she wanted a divorce, I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. I just said okay. Because what else was there to say? You can't reason with someone who's already left in every way that matters. That night, after I hung up, I poured myself a drink, whiskey, straight, and sat in the dark. The streetlights outside flickered through the blinds, and I stared at the reflection of myself in the glass window. I looked like someone I didn't recognize. There was this hollow, tired man staring back, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly invisible. I called my best friend, Mark, the next day. We'd known each other since college, and he'd always been the guy who kept me grounded. When I told him what happened, he wasn't surprised. "Man, I hate to say it," he said softly, "but I saw this coming." Apparently, even my friends had noticed how distant she'd become at gatherings, how she always seemed more interested in her phone than in the people around her. I wanted to hate her. God, I tried to hate her. But every time I did, my mind would flash back to all the good times. Her sleepy smile in the mornings, the way she'd hum while cooking, the notes she'd leave in my lunchbox when we first got married. Those memories felt like ghosts, haunting the empty rooms of our apartment. By December, the divorce papers came through. I signed them quietly, at my kitchen table, while snow fell outside. Cooper sat beside me, his head resting on my knee, like he knew something was ending. I mailed them back the same day and felt this strange mixture of relief and heartbreak. It was over. Just like that. I spent Christmas alone that year. My parents invited me over, but I couldn't bear to see their worried faces. I stayed home with Cooper, made myself a frozen dinner, and watched It's a Wonderful Life on TV. The irony wasn't lost on me. George Bailey realizing how much his life mattered while I sat there wondering if mine still did. It was sometime in January 2021 when I heard through mutual friends that Emily had officially moved in with Nathan. That hit harder than the divorce papers. It wasn't just that she'd left, it was that she'd replaced me so easily. Like I was a chapter she'd already finished reading. But here's the funny thing about heartbreak. At some point, it stops being this sharp, unbearable pain and turns into something duller. Like a constant hum in the background. You get used to it, the same way you get used to a leaky faucet or a squeaky door. It doesn't go away, but you learn to live around it. By spring, I'd started to pick myself up. I joined a gym. Got back into running along the lakefront. Reconnected with friends I'd pushed away. On the surface, I was doing better. But deep down, I was still haunted by this one question that wouldn't leave me alone. Why wasn't I enough? It sounds pathetic, I know, but that question consumed me. I replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for clues, wondering what I could have done differently. Was it something I said? Something I didn't say? Did she fall out of love, or did I just become too familiar? Then, one random afternoon in late April, I got a text. From her. "Hey, can we talk?" My heart started racing before I even replied. I told myself not to get my hopes up, but some part of me, the foolish, desperate part, couldn't help it. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind we used to go to when we were dating. I remember walking in and seeing her sitting by the window, sipping her latte, her hair a little shorter but otherwise the same. For a second, I almost forgot everything. It felt like stepping back into a dream I wasn't ready to wake up from. But when she looked up, I saw it, that flicker of discomfort, that hesitation. It wasn't warmth in her eyes. It was guilt. She told me she was sorry. Sorry for how things ended. Sorry for how she'd handled it. She said Nathan and she had hit a rough patch. That he wasn't who she thought he was. Apparently, he'd been distant, dismissive, even a little controlling. I listened, quietly, not saying much. Every word she spoke sounded like something I'd once said to her, and that irony stung more than anything. When she finally said, "I made a mistake," I didn't know how to respond. I just stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. She said she thought about me a lot, that she missed us. And for a brief, dangerous second, I felt this surge of hope. Like maybe the universe was finally giving me a second chance. But then I caught myself. All those sleepless nights, all those tears, all that pain, it came flooding back in a rush. And I realized something. She wasn't here because she loved me. She was here because she was alone again. That thought hit me like a cold wave. I told her I needed time to think, but deep down, I already knew my answer. Still, that night as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but think of the bitter twist of it all. How she'd chosen him over me, how she'd built her new life on the ruins of ours, and how, barely a month later, he'd dumped her. It should have made me feel victorious, vindicated, even, but instead it just made me feel empty. Because revenge, I realized, doesn't fill the spaces love once occupied. After that meeting with Emily, something inside me cracked open, not in a violent, explosive way, but quietly, like a frozen lake beginning to thaw. For months, I'd been stuck between anger and heartbreak, unable to move forward, unable to let go. But that conversation, her confession, her regret, forced me to confront everything I'd been avoiding. The truth was simple and brutal. She wasn't the same person I fell in love with. And maybe, neither was I. 4 weeks after that cafe meeting, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. The way she stirred her latte nervously, how she avoided eye contact when she admitted Nathan had left her, and that faint quiver in her voice when she said she missed me. It was strange. For so long, I'd fantasized about her coming back, apologizing, realizing what she'd lost. But when it actually happened, it didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow. There was something fragile about seeing her like that. The same woman who once held my entire world together, now sitting across from me, broken by someone she'd chosen over me. I should have felt satisfaction. But all I felt was this quiet sadness for both of us. For what we used to be. For what we'd destroyed. Still, healing isn't a straight path. It's messy. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Some nights I felt okay, like I was finally free. I'd cook dinner, take Cooper for a run, maybe watch a documentary before bed. Then, out of nowhere, a song or a smell or a line from an old movie would hit me, and I'd be right back in the middle of our living room, watching her pack her bags. That summer of 2021 was both the loneliest and most transformative period of my life. I started therapy, something I never thought I'd do. My therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Klein, helped me untangle the knots I'd been carrying in my chest. She told me something that stuck with me. Sometimes closure isn't about answers. It's about acceptance. I didn't fully understand it then, but over time, I did. I realized I'd been searching for closure in her apology, her regret, her pain. But closure doesn't come from the person who broke you. It comes from the person who rebuilds you. And that person had to be me. By September, I'd started going out again. Not dating, not yet, just existing around people again. A few friends dragged me to a rooftop party in the West Loop. I almost didn't go, but I forced myself to. And I remember standing there, beer in hand, city lights stretching across the skyline, and realizing I hadn't thought about Emily for a full hour. That might sound small, but in the aftermath of heartbreak, that's a victory. I started focusing on things I'd let slip away during our marriage. Photography, for one. Back in college, I used to love taking pictures, capturing fleeting moments. I bought myself a new camera and started shooting again. The lake at sunrise, busy city streets, even strangers at cafes. There was something healing about it. Like I was learning to see beauty again, even in things that weren't perfect. Emily tried reaching out a few more times that year. Once in October, then again on my birthday in November. I didn't respond to the first one. The second one, I replied with a polite, thanks. That was it. No anger, no longing, just indifference. And that's when I knew I was finally getting better. Around Christmas, my parents convinced me to visit them in Wisconsin. It was the first time I'd gone back since the divorce. My mom had that worried look mothers always have, the kind that tries to hide pain behind too many cookies and too much small talk. But by the third night, sitting by the fire, I opened up. I told her everything. The affair. The divorce. The aftermath. She just listened, quietly, like she'd been waiting years for me to unload it. When I finished, she took my hand and said, You loved her the best way you knew how. That's all anyone can do. It sounds cliché, but that line lifted something off me. For months, I'd been torturing myself with the idea that I wasn't enough, that if I'd been better, smarter, more attentive, she wouldn't have left. But maybe it was never about me. Maybe she was searching for something she couldn't even name. In early 2022, things really began to shift. I was promoted at work, a senior position that came with a pay raise and more responsibility. I moved out of the old apartment that spring. It took me 3 days to pack everything. Every corner of that place carried memories. Our first Christmas tree, our anniversary dinners, the nights we'd fallen asleep watching Netflix. When I closed the door for the last time, I whispered a quiet goodbye to the version of me that had lived there, the man who'd loved her without limits. My new place was smaller but brighter. It had big windows overlooking the street, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine. I remember standing there the first morning, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor, and thinking, this is where I start over. But life, in its strange, almost poetic way, has a habit of testing your peace just when you find it. In March 2022, I ran into Emily again, completely by accident. It was at a grocery store, of all places. I was reaching for a carton of eggs when I heard her voice behind me. That same familiar tone that used to say my name in the mornings. When I turned, there she was. She looked different. Older, maybe. Tired. The spark she used to carry in her eyes was dimmer now. We exchanged awkward small talk. Weather, work, the usual. She mentioned she was doing okay. I could tell that wasn't true. As she talked, I realized something that both saddened and comforted me. I didn't love her anymore. I cared, sure. I wished her well. But that desperate, all-consuming need to be chosen by her, it was gone. Before we parted ways, she said, I really hope you're happy now. I smiled and said, I am. And for the first time, I meant it. That night, I sat on my couch with Cooper at my feet, a bowl of pasta in my lap, and The Office playing in the background, the same show we used to watch together. But this time, I didn't feel nostalgic or sad. I just felt content. The healing wasn't loud. It didn't come with a grand revelation or some cinematic moment. It was quiet, subtle, a steady return to myself. Still, I won't pretend it was all neatly tied up. There were days the loneliness hit hard, when I'd scroll through social media and see friends getting engaged or having kids, and wonder if I'd missed my chance at all that. But then I'd remind myself, sometimes the life you thought you wanted isn't the one meant for you. Sometimes, losing something you loved is how you find who you are. It took me a long time to see it that way. And yet, just when I thought I'd finally closed that chapter for good, something unexpected happened. Something that tested everything I'd learned about forgiveness, closure, and what it means to move on. But that's another part of the story. By the time spring of 2022 rolled into summer, I had settled into a version of peace I never thought I'd have again. My days were full, early morning runs with Cooper by the lake, late nights spent editing photos for local exhibitions, and weekends hiking with friends I'd rediscovered after years of isolation. I wasn't healed, not completely. I don't think anyone ever truly heals from heartbreak. But I was learning to live around the scars. Then, in July, I got an email from Emily. It was short, barely a paragraph. She said she'd seen some of my recent photography online and wanted to congratulate me. At first, I didn't even respond. It felt unnecessary. But curiosity has a funny way of pulling you back toward things you've already walked away from. 2 days later, I sent a polite, thanks, hope you're doing well. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, she replied again, this time, a little longer. She said she'd been following my work quietly for months. That she admired how I'd moved on so gracefully. Those words hit me like a faint echo of the past, the kind of flattery she used to use when we first met. I told myself not to read into it, but the human heart doesn't listen to logic. Over the next few weeks, we exchanged a few emails. Just small talk, her new job, my photography, random memories from our old life. I told myself it was harmless, that we were two adults having civil conversations. But deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. There was still unfinished business between us, something unspoken that hovered in every message. Then one night, she sent a longer email. It started off like the others, polite, nostalgic, but then it shifted. She said she'd been struggling since the breakup with Nathan, that the relationship had been toxic and left her questioning everything. She admitted that he'd cheated on her multiple times, that he'd made her feel small, insecure, worthless, all the things I used to feel when she drifted away from me. Reading her words was surreal. It was like the universe had spun the wheel full circle. She wrote, "I finally understand what I did to you, and I hate that it took losing everything to see it." That line stayed with me for days. I won't lie, a part of me felt vindicated. For so long, I'd been haunted by the thought that I wasn't enough. But here she was, confessing that the life she'd chosen over ours had crumbled into ashes. Still, there was another part of me, the part that had once loved her deeply, that felt something softer. Not pity, exactly, but empathy, because I knew what that kind of emptiness felt like. When she asked if we could meet, just to talk, I hesitated. Every rational part of my mind screamed no. But my heart, ever the fool, wanted closure. Real closure this time. So I agreed. We met at this small park near Lincoln Square, the same spot we used to bring Cooper when he was a puppy. It was early evening, the sun just beginning to dip, painting everything gold. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on the bench, wearing a faded denim jacket I recognized from years ago. When she looked up and saw me, there was this flicker of something in her eyes. Relief, maybe. Or guilt. She smiled, softly, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. I saw the girl I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. We talked for nearly 2 hours. She told me everything, how Nathan had slowly turned cold, how the relationship had gone from passion to control, how he'd left her for someone younger. She said she'd moved out of their shared apartment and was living alone now, trying to rebuild. I listened quietly, not interrupting. I wanted to hear it all, not out of spite, but because it felt like watching the final scene of a movie I'd been stuck in for too long. Then, she said something that took me off guard. "I think about you a lot," she said. "Not in a romantic way, necessarily. Just in the way you loved me. I didn't deserve it, but I miss it." For a second, I couldn't breathe. It was everything I had once wanted to hear, years too late. But there was something freeing about it, too. Hearing her say it didn't stir the old longing anymore. It only made me realize how far I'd come. I told her I wished her well, that I hoped she found peace. She smiled, eyes glistening, and said, "You already have, haven't you?" I nodded. That night, I went home and sat in silence for a long time. I thought about how easily we destroy the things we love, not out of malice, but out of fear, selfishness, or simple neglect. Emily wasn't evil. She was human, flawed like me. And for the first time, I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean welcoming someone back into your life. It means releasing the power they have over your pain. And when I finally did that, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The strange part is, after that meeting, I started hearing about her more often, through mutual friends, social media, random conversations. Apparently, she'd been struggling to find steady work, moving from one short-term job to another. Nathan had moved out of the city entirely. She was living in a small studio apartment in Ravenswood, trying to start fresh. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. But I won't lie, there was a certain poetic justice in it. Life has a way of balancing itself out, even when we least expect it. Still, karma wasn't what healed me. It was the realization that I didn't need her downfall to feel whole again. I had already won the moment I stopped chasing what had broken me. By the end of that year, my photography took off in ways I couldn't have imagined. One of my lakefront shots, a black and white portrait of a jogger silhouetted against a foggy dawn, got featured in a local art magazine. That small recognition sparked something. I started getting freelance requests, small exhibitions, even a few print sales. It wasn't fame or fortune, but it was mine. My name, my work, my story. Then came something I never saw coming: love, again. Her name was Claire. I met her at a photography workshop downtown. She was one of the organizers, witty, smart, grounded in a way that immediately put me at ease. She wasn't flashy or loud, just quietly confident. We bonded over art, coffee, and our mutual hatred for Chicago winters. At first, I was cautious. I didn't want to project my old wounds onto something new. But Claire was patient. She didn't rush me. She didn't try to fix me. She just stayed. And slowly, I let her in. By early 2023, we were officially together. She'd come over on weekends, we'd cook dinner, watch bad reality TV, and fall asleep with Cooper snoring at our feet. It wasn't the wild, cinematic love I once believed in. It was something steadier, more real. The kind of love that doesn't demand proof every day. The kind that feels like home. One night, as we sat on the balcony watching the city lights, Claire asked about my past. About Emily. I told her the truth. Not every painful detail, but enough to be honest. She listened quietly, then said something that still echoes in my mind. Sometimes the wrong person teaches you what the right one should feel like. I smiled, realizing how right she was. And then, as if life wanted to close its final loop, Emily reached out again, one last time. It was early spring, 2023. She sent a long message saying she was happy I'd moved on, that I deserved peace. She admitted she still thought about me sometimes, but in a way that made her grateful. Grateful that I'd once loved her so fully, even when she couldn't love herself. I replied simply, "We both learned something from it. I wish you well, Emily." And that was it. The final thread snapped quietly, almost tenderly. No anger. No drama. Just closure, the kind I'd been chasing for years without realizing it. The tables had turned, yes, but not in the way I'd once imagined. It wasn't about revenge or karma or who won. It was about evolution. She lost herself trying to find something better. I found myself by letting go of what was already gone. By the time 2023 rolled fully into view, I was a different man. Not in a flashy, I've conquered the world sort of way, but in the quiet, unshakable way someone rebuilds their life from ashes. The apartment I'd moved into, the photography work I'd started, the slow, steady relationship with Claire, all of it was proof that life could go on, even after everything had fallen apart. Looking back, I realize now that the real breaking point wasn't Emily leaving me. It wasn't even Nathan showing his true colors. The real breaking point was when I realized that I had been giving pieces of myself away to someone who couldn't hold on to them, and that I had let it define my self-worth. That was the moment I understood something vital. Nobody else's actions should dictate my value. Not a lover. Not a friend. Not even someone I thought I'd spend forever with. Claire became more than a companion. She became a mirror of the version of me I had almost forgotten. She challenged me to see the world differently, to laugh again, to allow myself small joys without guilt. One Saturday, we went to the lakefront for a photography shoot. It was early, mist rising from the water, and I caught a reflection of us in the shallow waves. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not just content, not just safe, but entire. I also learned to forgive. Not Emily, not Nathan, not even myself for the years I wasted chasing closure from the wrong people. Forgiveness didn't erase the scars. It transformed them into something useful. It allowed me to remember the past without being chained to it. It gave me perspective, a memory of love and loss that shaped me, but no longer imprisoned me. There were moments, of course, when I still thought of Emily. Sometimes a song on the radio would echo a memory, or Cooper would paw at the door expecting her to come home. But those moments no longer carried pain. They were just echoes of a story I had once lived and had now survived. There was no bitterness, only a quiet understanding that some chapters end, not because the love wasn't real, but because timing, choices, and growth demanded. Then came spring 2024. Claire and I decided to adopt another dog, a husky we named Coda. Cooper took it in stride, though he eyed Coda with that wary patience older dogs often have for new puppies. The house was alive again, not with tension or longing, but with laughter, barking, and the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings. Life had found its rhythm again, steady and comforting. Professionally, I was thriving as well. My photography exhibitions had grown in popularity, and I'd begun teaching workshops to aspiring photographers. Sharing my skills, my perspective, my story through art became another form of therapy, a reminder that even after heartbreak, something beautiful could emerge. And each time a student told me that my work inspired them, I felt an almost indescribable pride. Not for the recognition, but for the proof that resilience, even in its quietest form, leaves a mark. And then there was the day I realized something astonishing. The world didn't end when she chose someone else. In fact, it expanded. The void she left behind became a space to discover parts of myself I had long ignored. I learned to enjoy solitude, to treasure moments of silence, to find strength in independence. By the time I'd allowed someone new into my life, not as a replacement, but as a partner walking beside me, I understood that love doesn't heal the past. It simply makes the future brighter. Emily's story. I kept tabs, silently, the way you watch an old film you once starred in. She struggled for a while, moved apartments, changed jobs, dated someone else briefly, and eventually seemed to find her own path. I didn't reach out. There was nothing left to fix between us, nothing to reclaim. That chapter had closed, and in its closing, I finally felt free. The oddest part is that the moment of real triumph wasn't about revenge or karma or watching her stumble. It was about my own awakening, about reclaiming my life, my time, my heart, and realizing that the person I should have been chasing all along was me. I remember one evening, late July 2024, sitting on my balcony with Claire, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. Cooper lay at our feet, Coda nudged my arm for attention, and a soft breeze carried the faint aroma of street food from the vendors below, the same smell that had once introduced me to Emily all those years ago. I laughed quietly to myself, thinking how ironic life can be, how cruel, yet how kind. How it takes you to the edge, pushes you down, and then hands you something better when you least expect it. I looked at Claire, and then at the dogs, and finally at my reflection in the glass sliding door. I saw a man who had been broken, abandoned, humiliated, and betrayed, and who had survived. Not just survived, but learned. Learned that love is not possession, that self-worth cannot be borrowed from someone else, and that true happiness often arrives quietly, in small, steady doses. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in what felt like decades. No dreams of betrayal, no haunting what-ifs, no echoes of heartbreak. Just the soft breathing of the dogs beside me, Claire's hand resting lightly on mine, and a profound, unshakable sense of completion. My wife had chosen him over me once. But in the end, life had a better plan, and I had found it, not in her return, not in her regret, not in some vindictive twist of fate, but in myself. Because sometimes, the story isn't about who left, who stayed, or who got hurt. Sometimes, it's about who learns to rise after the fall, who learns to turn heartbreak into strength, and who finally discovers that the life you were meant to live has been waiting for you all along. And that was me.